Hey, you're looking for a podcast where you can hear from some great hockey legends, listen to them tell some great stories, and find out what they're up to today? Well, this is it. It's the Domino's Pizza Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Gino Reda. Today's guest, a special one, folks, a Stanley Cup champion who played 17 seasons with 4 different teams in the NHL. Over 600 points, over 1,000 NHL games, an Olympic gold medalist with Team Canada in 2010, full of stories about his relationship with John Tortorella, and he's been a roadie with a rock band. We'll get into that as well with my buddy Danny Boyle. Danny, how you doing, my friend? Good to see you.
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
I got to share in a couple of your great career moments, both when you hoisted the Stanley Cup with Tampa in 2004, and I was there in 2010 for the golden goal at the Olympics. Here's where I want to start. Sidney Crosby was your teammate then. He was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
He was a leader. Sidney Crosby just led Canada in large part to the 4 nations. Can you believe he's still playing at the level that he's still playing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are special players that come along every few decades or so. He's one of them. I got to watch some growing up, but certainly not surprised at all. Keeps himself in great shape. And what he has always been better at than everyone else, which I think allows guys to stay in the game, is just being mentally sharp and being a little bit smarter and quicker than everyone. And I'm not surprised one bit.
One of the great things I loved about your game, and everybody really loved about your game, is your intensity. And that's Danny Boyle. That's not just Danny Boyle, a hockey player. That's you. That's who you are. What did you think of the 3 fights in 9 seconds to start that preliminary round? Canada, USA. Were you at least a bit surprised by that?
I would say I was surprised, but I loved it. I mean, I think that, I don't know, it hyped up the whole thing. I think, at first some people were like, well, what is this going to be like? Is this going to be like, how's the intensity of this going to be like? And I thought it was great for the game, great for the Canadian-U.S. rivalry. I thought it was awesome. I thought it was actually perfect. I'm sure those guys talked about it before the game, maybe to just kind of get this going. And I thought it was a great way to start. Great way to start the game.
I thought it was really interesting because on both sides, there were guys who had been in Game 7 in the Stanley Cup final, and now we're in a championship game.
Yeah.
International game. You got a chance to play in both. Let me, as somebody who won both,
yeah.
Let me ask you, what's it like? Give me a sense of the different feelings you have going into a Game 7 versus wearing a Team Canada jersey when you know this is it.
Well, there's obviously pressure. There was pressure in both. I think the difference was growing up as a Canadian hockey player, not to downplay the Olympics, but it was all about the Stanley Cup growing up. We watched hockey growing up, and the Olympics and players in the NHL players in the Olympics weren't in until very later on. So for me, the Stanley Cup was like more of a selfish me thing and my family thing, whereas the gold medal was more of like Canada and the 35 million people. So there were different kinds of pressure. I don't know which one had more. But again, the Stanley Cup thing felt more personal, whereas the Olympic gold medal game felt more of like a Canadian thing. And I knew that as Canadians, the silver medal we all knew the silver medal would have got us kicked out of the country. Unlike other countries where they're very proud of their silver medals, I wouldn't want to have come back in 2010 in Canada having won silver.
I want to ask you about the source of your intensity, because, I mean, you're a smaller size guy as a D-man when you weren't supposed to be able to play in the NHL as a D-man. It's different today. The NHL teams are way more open-minded than that. Just to give our audience a bit of a background, you went the NCAA route. You were better than a point a game during your time at Miami, Ohio.
Yep.
First All-American first team twice, 97 and 98. A runner-up for the Hobey Baker, but you went undrafted.
Yeah.
Did that, how much of that sparked who you ultimately became on the ice?
A ton. I mean, even when I was in, I'm going to go back even a few years before, when I was 16 playing Tier 2 junior here in Ottawa, a team called the Gloucester Rangers. I was a 16-year-old playing with 18, 19-year-olds. And this is the part where I struggle. I don't want to sound conceited or whatever, but I was.
You can sound conceited. Okay, brother.
I was better than everyone. I was way better than everyone, even as a 16-year-old, as a 17-year-old, and then in college and 4 years of college. I'm the Hobie Baker runner-up a few years. I'm, probably the best defenseman in the country. And yeah, I wasn't expecting at my size to be drafted in the first 2 or 3 rounds, but I couldn't understand for the life of me. I don't know how many rounds there were back then, 10, 11, 12, why a team couldn't take a flyer or a risk on a 10th round pick for, the best defenseman in college hockey, and they never did. And so, for those of you that are bored hearing my story, I mean, that's the fire I've carried in me since I was 14, 15 years old, having scouts tell my dad, your son's really good, but he's never going to make it. So I always thought I wasn't going to make it. And I just kind of kept myself going. And that tenacity and intensity that I've had is driven from people telling me I couldn't do it. And, me saying kind of F you or a finger in the air, I am going to do it. And that's kind of been my thing since way, 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 way before even being in the NHL.
How'd you win favor with the Florida Panthers? Because they were the team that took the chance on you. They signed you.
Yeah, there's a really interesting story there. So, again, my senior year at Miami, I was doing pretty well. I was one of the best defensemen, if not the best defenseman in the country. And I had an agent at this point, and he was asking around, and no one was interested. And at Miami, Ohio, this is a really weird story, but the golf coach at Miami, Ohio, was Bill Davidge, who is ended up being working for the Columbus Blue Jackets as a play-by-play guy, and he basically begged, and he was a part-time scout for the Florida Panthers. So that's the connection. So he basically begs and pleads with the Florida Panthers, please sign this kid, and that's how I got to sign on with Florida, because he begged for me. And they gave me, I think, a bucket of popcorn as a signing bonus. And it got my foot in the door. Now, training camp comes and they send, their farm team is in New Haven, Connecticut. And they send me and 3 other guys in Lexington, Kentucky. So I wasn't even on their map. But then after that, I think the rest is history. I played half a year in the minors, did very well, got the call up, and 18 years later.
The big, I'm going to use our trademark TSN turning point here was the Tampa Bay Lightning. You get dealt to the Lightning, and
again for a bag of popcorn, I believe.
But now you're playing for John Tortorella, and I love this story. I love how, I mean, Torts has been a buddy of mine for forever. No one tells Torts what to do. Torts tells everybody else what to do, and loudly and often. But you went to Torts and changed his mind about how you could and should play, because the way you played, Tortorella would have cringed thinking that there's any defenseman playing for him the way you played.
Absolutely.
Explain how that started and how that turned out.
So when I got traded from Florida to Tampa, I don't think Torch knew who I was, to be honest with you. And Florida was the last place team, and Tampa was second or third to last. So way out of the playoffs, there was half a season remaining, and I think they were just throwing some players out on the ice. And I went from being a healthy scratch for like 19 games in a row to getting traded to Tampa to all of a sudden playing 30 minutes a night. And when I first got there, Torch didn't know what I was doing. He didn't understand my game, but he saw that I was competitive, and obviously offensively I was gifted, but he got a little nervous when he saw me forechecking. He saw me behind the opponent's net on the offensive zone. He didn't quite understand that. So at some point the following year,
in fairness though, you're doing something you're not supposed to do. As a
I wasn't. Yeah, I mean, again, I looked. I mean, again, I wasn't the first. I looked at Brian Leetch was my kind of guy growing up. Obviously he was a defenseman that could, change the game. I wasn't around for Bobby Orr, so I can't, go back to his type of game. But certainly, for me, puck possession was so important. And when we dumped the puck in, and the forwards were changing or whatever. So I was like, well, why, if I can get there, why not go get the puck and wait for my forwards to get in? Or it became such a predictable game. As a forward, they just have to watch their D-man. But what happens if the right D-man is going behind the net? Where do they go? It causes confusion. And so eventually, at some point, Torts and I had it out. And I said, just kind of let me do my thing. And I promise you, I will be the first guy back. And that was his thing. Play well defensively, take care of your own end, and I'll let you do whatever you want offensively. And that's where I eventually won him over, where, yeah, sure, I might be forechecking. I might be behind the net trying to cause confusion. But anytime there was a breakdown, I was always the first one back. And that's when I eventually, it took a little while. It wasn't easy. But I think he started understanding the rover position as we know it today, where causing confusion in a predictable game can be a good thing if the player that's doing it knows what he's doing.
And you've got the skill and the speed to be able to get back and cover.
Well, you have to have that, right? If you get caught, and again, is it going to happen 10 times out of 10? Are you going to get back? No. But I told him, hey, man, if I get back 8 or 9 times out of 10, are we willing to, sacrifice the one time it doesn't happen for possibly 3 or 4 goals, 4 that it is? And, I think he eventually, I don't say gave in. He's not going to like that, but we came to an agreement.
You came to agreement and it worked, because now we get to the 03-04 season with Tampa, an historic season for the Tampa organization. You had a 60-point regular season, which was amazing. I mean, again, you're a D-man and you're a 60-point and you're good in your own zone. Then you go to Tampa's first ever Stanley Cup final. You had 10 points, leading all defensemen in the playoffs and winning the Stanley Cup. What's that like when behind you are all these guys who are like, no, we don't want him. We're not going to draft him. It's the 8th, 9th, 10th round. We're not interested. To Florida, where you're a healthy, sitting, watching.
Yeah.
You go to Tampa and you say, Torts, trust me on this. I can do this, to the point where now you've done it. What's that like?
I that was a chip on my shoulder. And it wasn't weight for me. It was actually, it was welcomed weight. And I carried that. You want to play for someone or play against someone. Use whatever motivation you want. Mine was in spite of people. Of course, I was playing for my family and my teammates and all that as well, of course. But I certainly had that FU attitude about the people that didn't. And when I got to Tampa, like I said, we were a second to last place team. And within 2 years, we won the cup. And I'm not saying it's because of me. We had a lot, obviously great players, but that team came together, but it came together quick. And we had a great mixture of players. And, I was in, a lot of people don't know, but that run, I was playing with a broken hand. So I'm very proud of that run, because I was getting shot up every night. And back then in 2004, believe it or not, it was 20 years ago, like nobody knew. In practice, I was turning my bottom hand. You're supposed to hold your stick like this. I practiced this way, and I wasn't shooting pucks. Not one media person noticed, asked me about it or anything.
Thanks to me. It was so bad, brother.
It was insane. Like, because you're supposed, as a writer, you're supposed to, play like this. Well, in practice, because I wasn't getting shot up, this helped me for some reason. And I was just kind of making passes like this. I could kind of shoot like wrist shot like this, but absolutely zero slap shot through 3.5 weeks of playoffs. Not one single media person asked me about it.
Thanks.
The game's changed along. Yeah, right. The game's changed. So.
I was one of those media guys who covered you guys when we were going back and forth between Calgary and Tampa, which, by the way, was a brutal pain in the butt, that travel thing.
Yeah, that was.
Why don't you tell our audience? So you guys play game 1 against the Flames. You lose the game. It was not a good game from your team standpoint.
Yeah.
But it was a lot worse than just a bad game. Why don't you tell our audience what happened to you personally in your own personal life while you were on the ice for game?
Yeah. Talk about like craziness, absolute craziness. So I get off the ice where we lose. We're all in the worst mood possible. And then Dave Anderchuk, our captain at the time, comes in the locker room and gives me one of these, which is weird to begin with. And then he's like, we got to go into Torts' office. And I was like, we just lost the game, Stanley Cup Finals. I'm like, pissed. And we're walking in there, and we walk in, there's Jay Feaster, our GM, Torts is in there, and they're like, sit down. And then I'm like, what the hell's going on? I'm not getting traded, obviously, but I was like surreal. And they're like, everything's fine, but your house is on fire. I'm like, what do you mean my house? At the time, I had a house in Fort Lauderdale when I used to play for the Panthers, and I thought something's going on. They're like, no, your house in Tampa. And so, long story short, during Game 1 of Stanley Cup Finals, at some point, the firefighters who ended up watching the game got the call that my house went up on fire. They got to my place, and it started at my memorabilia room where I had a couple jerseys and some plaques and some trophies. And I guess when they get the call, they just get the address. They don't have whose house it is. And they were like, as they were hosing it down, I guess one of the guys was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? So my house went up in flames, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals against the Calgary Flames, which is so weird. And so I ended up spending the next, basically the rest of that series. Oh yeah, my closet went up in flames. So I had no clothes except the suit on my back. And so I ended up staying in one of those like places were furnished hotels for the rest of the series, or in the hotel. They went and bought me like underwear and socks, and then I ended up borrowing Brad Richards. We were about the same size. I ended up borrowing like 2 or 3 of Richie's suits for the rest of for the finals, because it wasn't like I had time to go shopping for that stuff. I'm in the finals, the most important time of my life. So it was just a surreal moment. And then Torts had the very famous, speak of your buddy Torts, the next day he does the interview, and they ask him about it. He says, it's just wood burning over there. I'm like, Torts, a freaking house, man, not just freaking wood, that was a classic line from Torts as far as I'm concerned. Oh yeah, it's just wood burning over there. It's fine. Everything's fine. But the Tampa Bay Lightning did a great job of taking care of me, making sure my focus was on the ice, and had a broken hand. My house was on fire. Wasn't the greatest time off the ice, but obviously one of the greatest, if not, the greatest achievement of my life.
But you're a Stanley Cup champion, man. You made it.
I am. That's right.
Get ready for the game with the Domino's $8.99 mix and match deal. Score big with any medium 2-topping pizza and any 2 items like pastas, stuffed cheesy bread, boneless chicken, or classic chicken wings. Domino's has you covered. Order today from Canada's favorite pizza at domino's.ca. Now, you've had a couple of freaky things happen to you. Let's talk September 2007. You're coming off a season where you led Tampa in scoring, so everything's going fantastic. You're in a preseason exhibition game, and probably the weirdest freak thing ever heard happen in a dressing room. I've seen some weird crap happen on the ice.
Yeah.
Tell our audience what happened to you.
So a lot of people don't know, back then, when you would think you would put your skates on the ground after you're done, but in locker rooms they have these hooks that used to be horizontal. So you put your little skate in there, and the skates just dangle and they dry up there. And so after a preseason game, I put my skates on there like I've done a million times before. I'm getting undressed. I turn around. There's a bin underneath. I'm putting the rest of my stuff down. And as I close the bin, the vibration, which has happened again 1,000 times before, this is gross, but the skate, I didn't put it on properly. The skate gets knocked off, falls, and slices my wrist. So right away, it's like, ow. I put my hand on my wrist like this. I don't even look at it. I run right to the trainer's room, and I kind of look away like this. And I said, is it bad? And they said, can you hitchhike? Like, do this? I couldn't. Well, then I looked down, and I had severed all 3 tendons. So again, another very long story, but severed 3 tendons, get surgery the next day. It's a 12-week minimum recovery. And there's a much longer story attached to this, but I won't go into that one too much. But I come back in 4.5 weeks.
A little earlier than 12 weeks.
A little. So I come back in 4.5 weeks. I played 3 games. I was like minus 100. I could barely hold my stick. After the third or fourth game, I think, I went into the doctor's office. I'm like, hey man, something's not right. He's like, oh yeah, two of those three have snapped back. I mean, if you like, my grip strength must have been like a 10 out of 100. And so end up getting another surgery where I took the 12 weeks, I believe. And so that season was kind of a loss for the team and myself. We did not make the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, that was a freak accident, kind of a weird
I should have
situation
apologized to our audience because things are going to get squeamish for a part of our audience. Now, I do want to ask you, I don't want to dwell on injuries and stuff because I want to talk about your successes, but one of the scariest things I've ever seen in a hockey game happened to you in October of 2013 when you got nailed by
in St. Louis. Yeah.
Lapierre.
Yeah.
Got hit from behind. The reason I want to ask you about this because I want to check on were there ever any long-lasting ramifications of this, and are you fully okay? Tell our audience what happened in that day and bring us up to speed on how you are health-wise today.
Yeah. So I've only had two concussions, diagnosed concussions where I was knocked out. The first one, I was in the hospital the night before with the flu, getting IVs. Probably shouldn't have played. I played, I get knocked out. The one in St. Louis you're referring to, very similar situation. I had the flu the night before. I don't remember exactly if I was getting IVs, but I was, it was one of those things. But as a player, we fight through and we play through everything. And I should not have played that night, but of course, are you ready to go? I said yes. I get hit from behind by Maxime Lapierre. Now, was it the worst ever? No. Was it a hit that was dirty? Absolutely. And I get knocked out. Now, anyone that watches UFC, boxing, sports, guys are knocked out for 5-10 seconds, smelling salts, they're awake. Well, I was out for 7 minutes. So they cut to commercial break, which is usually 4 or 5 minutes. They come back and I'm still out. So that's the bad news. I mean, the bad news was that it was scary. I was out for a long time. I don't even understand being out 7 minutes. I don't remember it. Woke up in the ambulance. The good news is I am great with the exception of my sleep, since that has been a real struggle for me. So right after the concussion, I was sleeping 17, 18 hours a day. And then since, it's been kind of a struggle of getting to sleep and staying asleep, which is something I battle with today. But as far as memory, headaches, or that kind of stuff, I have none of those. But I had to see a sleep specialist to help me with certain things. But it's been a challenge. And then that's another thing. I came back, I missed 4 games, right? It's like, that doesn't compute. But I'm very proud of that season. It was my last season in San Jose. It was probably my worst season in San Jose statistically. But I'm very proud because I struggled hard off the ice, but I battled on the ice to play. And I'm very proud of that season.
Yeah. And I'm just, I didn't realize you're still battling with the sleep issues, and I'm sorry for that. I hope.
It's something. It's just instead. I used to be a great napper, fall asleep. Now there's just a little bit of a routine to it. I definitely went through, some Ambien, some Xanax, and some stuff. But I weaned myself off that, and I'm really concentrating on just trying to get through a routine and find a way to stay asleep. And even if it's going to be 5 or 6 hours, that's better than, being hooked on, stuff that, gives you not natural sleep.
Oh, good for you, man. Good for
Thank you.
It's interesting that, on the heels of the Four Nations, as hockey fans, we kind of look back at the international hockey thing. And as I said off the top, you had an opportunity to do the best of the best on international hockey at the 2010 Olympics and, winning a Stanley Cup. The Olympics coming up next year in Italy. Players who were like, I'm playing for Canada no matter what the injury is. Even Sid had the bad wing, and he insisted on playing because he desperately wants to play next year for the Olympics. It's not like if Sid missed this, they weren't going to put him on the Olympic team.
Right.
Still go to the Olympics. He's still going to wear the C, but it's just that passion to represent the country. How much do you miss that? Because I mean, like you and I joke about the fact that you love the FU guys and flip them a bird. You're a gritty guy. You're a gritty guy. How much do you miss that aspect of it? When the Olympics come up like this, do you think about it especially more so than the other stuff?
I do. As much as I played in spite of people, again, I mentioned it quickly. Like I loved playing for people as well. And I remember winning the gold 2010, and I didn't have the moment where I was like, yes, me. It was like looking around and seeing the crowd. And then the thing I remember the most was being in the locker room. And then I don't know if I'm imagining this, but that's what I remember. But they showed us a coast to coast, some shots from Halifax all the way to Vancouver and every kind of major city in between. They showed us live shots of when the fans reacted to that goal. And that I miss. I miss, doing something for others and rewarding others and being the proud Canadians. And I certainly miss being part of that as well.
I'll tell you what, man. I remember exactly where I was. I was up in the rafters in the building. I was sitting just a few feet away from Michael J. Fox, Ultimate Canadiana. He was in the box with us watching the game with his mom, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is Canadiana.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the greatest moments in my life, and it was awesome. And I didn't watch the replay till like 10 years later. And I doubt Ray Whitney will be listening to this, the old wizard. I heard he was on a podcast a couple of weeks ago. He said something about, or not even a couple of weeks ago, very recently, he said they talked about like ice time and said Pronger and whoever his partner was. Like, I don't know if it was a shot at me on purpose, but I had my buddy dig the ice time in the gold medal game, and Chris Pronger was number one, and Dan Boyle was number two, which I would have never guessed in a million years that I was, up there, even more than Niedermayer, who is like, again, another one of my heroes and favorite defensemen. But if you're watching, Dan Boyle was number two in total ice time in the gold medal game. So F you to Ray Whitney as well.
Well, you know what? I'll clip this and send it to him. He'll love it.
Please do. Please do. I don't know if it was a subtle chirp or if he knew what he was saying, but I had no idea. So I had one of my buddies look it up. And yeah, I was completely shocked. And not only that, after they score the tying goal, after the USA, Parise scores the tying goal, there's less than a minute left, and they put me and Pronger out there. I'm like, wait a minute, they did? Like I did not know that until I watched the replay a decade later, which is an amazing, which is awesome, which is just such an awesome feeling.
That's awesome, man. Listen, you've been incredibly generous with your time, and I've loved hearing you tell the stories. I want to do one last thing before I say goodbye. We do a little thing we call 5 fast facts, where I ask you 5 quick questions. You give me the first things that come to mind. Up for it?
Absolutely.
All right, time now for 5 fast facts with Olympic gold medalist Danny Boyle. Danny, who was the best teammate that you ever played with?
Best teammate, Marty St. Louis. Off the ice, Doug Murray.
Fair enough. Who was the best coach you ever played for?
Craig Ramsey was not a head coach, but I got to give Craig Ramsey the salute of the hat, tip of the hat there.
Tortorella just texted me and said, "Nice guy. I really appreciate
it." Torts and Todd McClellan were my 2 favorite head coaches, but Craig Ramsey was very important.
Who did you hate playing against the most, and why?
In terms of I would say Peter Forsberg, as far as respect goes, and just his tenacity and his work ethic and how hard he was to play against.
After all the success in your career on and off the ice, what's the one piece of advice that if you could go back and talk to your 15-year-old self that you would give a 15-year-old Danny Boyle?
I mean, I did it, but just believe in yourself, because there's going to be a lot of negativity and nonsensers and, people that are going to be, at least in life, just please believe in yourself and work hard. That's the one thing you can control, your work ethic.
Last question. If you hadn't become a pro hockey player, what career do you think you would have done instead?
Well, we didn't talk about it, but I would have been a musician. A lead singer in a band, because I can't play anything, but music has been a big part of my life, and I would have been lead singer in a band somewhere.
And you were a roadie.
I know, we didn't talk about it. My favorite band growing up was Faith No More, which a lot of people are like, who? But they were a big deal, trust me. I got to meet them, and got to tour with him, and we became friends. And that was also a little like an aha moment where I'm like touring with Faith No More, and all of a sudden I'm setting up stages and helping him out with like it was an awesome and amazing few experiences. I've been on a couple tours with him.
5 fast facts with Stanley Cup champion, Olympic gold medalist, Danny Boyle. Danny, thanks, buddy. This has been so much fun. I loved hearing your perspective on some of the stories I knew about, and now hearing so many things that I had never known about before. I really appreciate this, my friend. Take care of yourself.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one. Ciao, Gino.
Wow, great stories with Stanley Cup champion, Olympic gold medalist, Danny Boyle. The Overtime Podcast is proudly presented by Domino's Pizza and Athletes Care. If you're watching the big game at home or hungry right now, Domino's has you covered. Check out the Domino's Mix and Match deal. Medium 2-topping pizzas, pastas, stuffed cheesy bread, boneless chicken, or classic chicken wings. Any 2 items for only $8.99 each. Canada's favorite pizza at Domino's.ca. Athletes Care is proud to be celebrating its 26th year offering sports medicine services to both elite athletes and the general population who require rehab for a new or chronic injury or pain. Go to where the best go. Athletes Care Sports Medicine Clinics with 26 locations in the Greater Toronto Area and in Ottawa. If you missed any parts of the show, don't worry. Visit our website at overtimepodcast.ca. The Domino's Pizza Overtime Podcast can be found on Spotify, iTunes Podcasts, or any of your favorite podcast platforms. As well, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at O-Time Podcast. Until next week, I'm Gino Reda saying so long, hockey fans, and thanks for joining us on the Domino's Overtime Podcast.